everyone. Welcome to DIGG Dojo, September 14th edition. So today we have a couple things to talk about. We're going to get Wiesik on to give us an update on round 4 of the KPI options. And then we have, I think, a pretty serious conversation that we need to have about kind of like the next steps for DIGG governance and some of the cool ideas that have been put forward, but also a serious conversation about like the resources that are necessary and how we're going to get those and prioritize those versus other stuff. So really kind of like rubber meeting the road in terms of next steps for DIGG governance and what happens with DIGG in terms of how it can get the resources for what it needs to do in the next stages. So yeah. When one of the other things, like a longtime DIGG supporter, Crypto Yield Info, was tweeting about the need to move DIGG to Arbitrum. So that's just like one of the many cool things that we could be doing, but need to figure out the best and smoothest way possible for where we're going to go. So we're in the round 4 of options right now. I think we've had a few negative rebases in a row, but also we've, I believe, unlocked at least 5 equilibrium. So we should have some rewards unlocking from this round. Wiesik, am I correct on that? Can you give us like a little snapshot of where we are with options now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, so this going back to back, we've kind of run into a couple operational challenges, which I wanted to talk through, which I think they're minor, but just wanted to share here and get everybody's thoughts. Gasudo has worked to basically update the snapshot process, which I'm really excited about. We've been trying to update the dig.finance page and think about some different ways we could do that by, like Omnifarious has done a great job, but the need to kind of start bifurcating things so that we can look at like rounds separately, because people want to see like if we give everybody 60 days to claim their options, and at the same time start another round, like we need to start looking at those separately, instead of current state, which is just like one massive kind of update page. So all those things, nothing really impacts the current state. I think it's just kind of created some like how do we do this kind of questions. The one thing that has come up though that I think I wanted to share here is just how this mechanically works is obviously we take the BDIG that is part of the last dropped and it's minted and that with UMA, and then basically the dropped options are, it's put into the UMA vault, and then the options are minted from it, and then that's what everybody sees and gets, and then they redeem it. And it's basically they mint 2 types of options, a long and a short token. And essentially the short token is to claim back any of the like unclaimed options and also any of the options that were, in the last round, I think we unlocked 88% of the rewards. So the other 12%, and it claims that and pulls it back. But that said, that means that we need to, like for the next round, we basically need to like grab those unclaimed rewards, grab any unclaimed, BDIG, which I'm sure there will be once it's done, and essentially go through that process again. And if we give everybody 60 days to claim their options, then as you can see, it kind of creates some challenges because we probably need to wait 60 days until we can do the next round. So my thinking, and this kind of goes in line with what we've talked about, but what I wanted to open up for discussion here is, my thought is that we should probably move this current round to 2 months versus a month, or it could even be 3 months, and it just kind of takes the current, mechanics that we've been working with. So instead of 5 days, it would be, if we went to 2 months, it could be 10 days to unlock. But just to ensure that we can seamlessly go from round to round and also claim back the unclaimed rewards as well as the rewards that were not unlocked, we probably need to provide some ability to do that. And current state, I don't think we could do that. So again, John Trivium, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. Just it is something I wanted to share as we were kind of getting ready for the 15th. We still need to post everything this week, which we will. And we've got the new snapshot completed, which will make things smoother. But at the same time, just wanted to discuss this one topic of like going from maybe 30 days to 60 days this round, or what everybody thinks. And maybe I'm mistaken too. So again, feel free if anybody on the core team feels like, hey, this isn't an issue, to correct me. But was just thinking about it a little bit over the weekend as we were starting to kind of get closer to the 15th.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I'd really like to see DIGG either start to find its own team and start to be able to do some of this more on its own, or to move to like more like even like quarterly operations, right? So do the drops on like a quarterly cadence. But yeah, it's a lot to do every month, and then also like things are always kind of like pretty last minute, so there's a lot of like scrambling involved in it, and it does kind of get in the way of other stuff and can be a bit of a distraction. I think like the other thing is like, like we can do, if there's like a very clear thing that we need to do once a month, so there's like a script that needs to be run and it needs to be signed by the multi-sig or something, like we can do that. But in terms of like anything that's not very regular operations, right, it would be nice to not have those come up with DIGG every like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I sorry, Johnson, you were going to say something. I don't want to interrupt.
No, I was just clicking around, but I guess I could follow on that. I would agree with Tridium that I think it's a lot, especially with the mechanic that you've built out. It's a lot to compile and distribute and deploy. Basically every 2 weeks you've got to do something big, and it takes at least a week to do like each one of those things. So it's pretty much a continual, a continual job. So I think going to a more stretched out structure, whether it's 2 months now and 3 months the next one, or 3 months now, makes the most sense to me.
That, or like maybe the thing with DIGG is that it needs to be much more dynamic than that, and we need to keep changing, and like that this is an experimental kind of thing in progress. But then we need to figure out like a team and how to get some other people doing that, right? I think one or the other.
Well, it does, and it needs. Regardless of another team or whoever, it needs some governance that I think is focused on the DIGG community, and then it needs a long-term plan for if the rebase options are going to be kind of a long-term solution or the focus, where those incentives come from, whether it's Wes done a lot of work getting accounting of where all the current DIGG is, and where the obligations are, and who's owed DIGG, and who has where DIGG may be that will be unlocked at some point in the future. Getting a handle on all of that and understanding what kind of dry powder there is available to use for future incentive events, and deciding, okay, does there need to be a one-time mint event? I think the possibility of doing a positive rebase tax basically for the DAO to fund the treasury to use for future incentives, whether it's rebase options or other things, makes sense. Like you need some sort of continual assets to continue to use, and then the long-term thing's got to be, okay, who's going to be the key group kind of running with this to keep it going, sustaining it, or kind of usher it along through its further evolution. It's been, I guess, we're past 6 months now in DIGG's life, but and that's a long time in DeFi years. So where do we kind of go from here? And I think that's finding this 1 month of good run of positive rebases. I know we're having some negative rebases now, but I would consider the past couple months more of a couple stability, at least in the community, and some stability in the asset, is a good time to say, all right, well, what's going to be the next 3 months, the next 4 months, and what do we need to do there? Who's going to be the most involved in helping to usher that along?
Yeah, so I think we probably have 2 topics to discuss today. One is kind of like DIGG phase 2, which I think we're starting to get into a little bit. And so before we get into that, because I think majority of the conversation will probably focus there. Just to go back to options really quick, my preference would be closer to 3 months. I think right now, just to go back to what Tritium said, DIGG consume and look, I think the cool thing about DeFi is you basically iterate, learn, and like the past 3 months or so has been really exciting to kind of go through this process, and we've learned a lot. I think one of the things we've learned is that doing it every 30 days turns DIGG into a constant fire drill for everybody, probably on the core team, or a lot of people on the core team, but also even just in terms of like how we think about how to best allocate resources and do stuff. It's a very time intensive manual exercise for people like myself or Wasabi or Omnifarious who created DIGG.finance. And so that's been one of the reasons we've been trying to figure out how to automate more. And then more recently, as we started getting closer to prepping for this next round, it became more obvious that there's actually just some operational challenges, like just the fact that you have to reclaim the tokens, you have to give people 60 days. And by giving people 60 days, it actually means you probably should wait at least 60 days, if not 90. So we can take this into the channel to discuss. Just to make kind of a quick suggestion here, my belief is that it would be best to go to 2 to 3 months this next round. We could just take all the same parameters that we've outlined for the last round and just, multiply them by however many more days. So if it's 2 months versus 1, we multiply them by 2. If it's 3 months versus 1, we multiply them by 3. All the same things apply. It actually will level out things a lot better and give more opportunity for equilibrium and positive rebases to unlock rewards. And it will give us the ability to actually claim the past dropped. Right, there's going to be stuff as we've gone through and tried to clean up DIGG's balance sheet. There's probably, addresses and stuff that will not claim the options because, they're just going to sit there. And so, after the 60 days, being able to claim that and also claim the unredeemed rewards that were not unlocked, we need to give more time than just like a couple days to. In that case, we just put a fire drill on. So that's my 2 cents on that. If anybody has any else thoughts, if not, happy to move this to, the DIGG rebase channel and discuss. And I'm happy to talk more about it with anybody that's interested. But that's probably my primary update on options, and happy to shift over to some like discussions that in terms of next phases and stuff like that. So I'll take silence as a agreement. But again, feel free. I think we should have this open up for more dialogue and discussions. I don't know if it necessitates like a channel. I think this is a fairly simple and it makes sense as to why we need to make the change in terms of timing, because it's going to scale better and it's going to give us a chance to reclaim the rewards. But if there are, obviously we want to give everybody a chance to give their thoughts. So maybe in the Dojo discussion thread, I feel like that's a good place. If anybody has any thoughts or suggestions or concerns, let's post them there, and happy to talk more about it there.
Yeah, one thing I'll just add is I think if it's going 3 months, thinking about having not just one intermediate snapshot, if there's a way to have 2 or something like that, could be.
We can actually do more than that. The way that Gasoto built everything, it's really amazing. He basically bypassed Dune, and he essentially looks at he built something that reads it straight off the blockchain and looks at DIGG in totality. So essentially, it looks at across every single address and then looks across every single type of holding that we consider to be eligible for options. We tied it out to make sure they match up, and now he can basically run this every single day, and we can give like somebody in the future could theoretically put their address in and see what % ownership of DIGG they have like every single day. So it's gonna increase the amount of snapshots. We could create rolling averages. We could do a lot more. So I think you're right. We need to increase the amount of snapshots, which we could open that up for discussion too.
Yeah, so I guess there's the snapshots and the distribution. So just figuring out the cadence of all that, so people kind of know how much they're getting and then what the rollover is. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement that the minting and redemption thing should be more of like a quarterly deal, but rewarding you for behavior over that full time frame.
Weezik, I'm curious if you have any kind of estimate of like a before picture in terms of like how many hours it took you and the core team to like process a round of options, and then how after we have this new system from Gasudo, like how much of a time savings are we gonna get from this? So like to see how much of an opportunity this opens up.
I can't speak for the core team. Like Tritium could. There's basically 2 levels of work that go into this. There's like the business or kind of the tokenomics side, which that's rested mostly on me in just terms of like aggregating queries, loading them together, normalizing DIGG, and creating like comparison models that look back at like weeks and then months. The new snapshot process simplifies that a lot more, but until we get it programmed into like dig.finance, we still have to model things out. But the new snapshot process saves me a lot of time. I don't think it saves the core team any time. Like they still have to go through the same rigmarole that they do today. So I'll defer to Tritium, but it's probably mostly saving me some time in the near future, not the team.
I mean, I think, again, from our point of view, I think most of the time spent is trying to figure out what to do or dealing with the fact that what we're doing is somehow different from the last time, or that like everything has to happen now. So like if we're on a 3-month schedule, or, you know, like that same thing, if we can get to a 3-month schedule, maybe we could go back to 1 month at some point. But like once we've got all the automation in place so that it's, you know, like weeks beforehand, everything's ready, like something can be loaded in, you know, to the multi-sig, and there's like a week for people to review it, and then it can sit there and kind of go through a normal process, then I think the frequency matters less, right? Again, it's about the frequency of non-standard kind of operations that I think really is the thing we need to be conscious about, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think
so.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, so for us, you're right. Like I guess if the situation is that in 2.5 months from now, or, you know, that at least 2 weeks before we need, you know, these things need to be emitted, they're done. And so if we're doing everything well beforehand, then how often we do it is probably less of a big deal. And I guess what's more important is that there's like 2 to 3 weeks of headroom between it being absolutely clear what we're going to do and when we need to do it, and that it's a continual process with just some changing inputs.
The challenge too over the last 2 months too is that like DIGG's total like balance sheet, if you will, of like assets and liabilities hasn't been like the easiest. Like there was the drop tokens that were still in the previous one that had to, you know, there was a lot of like fire drills for the team. I think as we've gotten more, like a lot of work's been put into like understand like where everything sits today, and that helps simplify things. But the reality is like we should be trying to figure out ways that are going to allow this to scale and not like require the same level of effort or like require constant like immediate support. Like if we can stretch things out so that the team knows like, hey, like we're going to do this in 2 weeks, and it gives everybody a chance to review, that's just a better way of working in general, not just in terms of like work-life balance, but just in terms of like security and just doing things the right way. You can build processes around stuff that you have time to look at. It's harder to build processes when it's like, hey, Tritium, we got 6 things we need to do. Can you get 4 of them done today? It's like, that's probably where people can make mistakes more easily, right? So
yeah, that's one thing. And I think the other thing is that, you know, like the effort should go into innovation, right? Not into maintenance. So I think that's, you know, like if there's effort and time and thought that's going to go into DIGG, and it sounds like you guys have put a bunch of that in, right? And so maybe we need to put a little bit more time in to like think about how to integrate all of that into, you know, some multi-sig operations that are standardized in order to make this all flow. And so like that's good effort to put in. And then I guess my point is that I think we have to do that, see how it flows, right? See if that's good. And then if so, you know, the frequency kind of depends on an understanding of that whole process on one side, right? And then when there's thought going in, it should be like, what are we going to do different? How are we going to do this differently? And where's the innovation, right? Like what's the next step? And who are the people that are going to figure out what that is? How are we going to get that implemented? And maybe like, how is there a way to do this using resources that aren't just the core team?
Yep.
I forget if it was you or someone else who made this comment, but that it would have just been easier to streamline the process by just having the BDIGG or DIGG be emitted just through the regular emissions process rather than doing this token minting, the short-term tokens and all that. Like, is there any way that could be a way to streamline the tech even further?
Yeah, I mean, the UMA part of this adds a lot of complexity, right? And most of the stuff that, you know, that Wes, you were talking about that we kind of had to deal with was complexity around that. And at least, you know, like what we did last time was like minted options for a week and then airdropped them and whatnot, right? It seems like our community trusts us so that if we say like, hey, we're going to airdrop this BDIG on these days based on these parameters, that's fine, right? So the two purposes that I can think of for the UMA options would be either that there was some like basket of different options and some different stakeholders and, like that needed to be more decentralized, or that like there was a trust issue, right? And so people wanted to be able to...
Yeah, like it makes sense it makes more sense to do it with UMA when you stretch it out over time. Like basically we did a bunch of redundant things where it was like, you had to claim your options and then you redeemed them. And then because the calc was incorrect, everybody was like, well, we just claimed our BDIG. So it just further points to the fact that if we want to stay with the UMA process, it makes more sense to spread it towards like a quarterly cycle versus a monthly, because it doesn't make sense to do it monthly if you're literally minting the options just to then redeem the same day, which is literally what we did last time. We minted them and then you could redeem them the same day. I think here's my take. I think this all makes sense. I think we're all in agreement, at least the people that are talking. For the people that haven't had a chance to talk, please post your thoughts on DIGG Dojo again, just to kind of reiterate. We want to kind of get everybody's considerations here. The thought, I guess, just to summarize and maybe then move on a little bit is, we've learned a lot from the last round. There's some things we want to think about going into the next round. There's some things that we've improved upon in terms of the snapshot process to kind of work towards a better and cleaner and more scalable way of working. And there's been some things that we need to consider just from an operational standpoint. And all those things kind of coming together likely lead to moving it to a quarterly cycle was probably the best option. And if there's no major concerns there, I think that would be my strong opinion. I don't think it's sustainable to do 30 days. And I don't even think if we could do it, given the fact that we have to give people 60 days to claim. And then we would have to basically turn around and find a way to basically mint more, but then it wouldn't be part of the initial supply that was part of this. So that's my thoughts. Happy to discuss it more on DIGG Dojo or anybody else wants to talk about it. But just in an effort to give more time to, I think, the second half of this discussion, which is the broader discussion, I think something that we need to spend some time on, which is just, okay, options is cool. That's great. Like we've been doing a lot with DIGG over the last 4 or 5 months. That's great. It's been cool to see these things happen. It's been cool to see how everything's been able to integrate and kind of improve. But I still think it gets us back to the question of what does phase 2 for DIGG look like, right? If everybody wants to kind of move on to that would be my thought.
Yeah, sounds
so
good.
I mean, Wasabi, do you want to kick it off where you were talking about some things with Arbitrum? And I know there's been some other discuss about Arbitrum, and there was previously discussion about like governance ideas. Just I'm not sure where the best place to start would be, but I feel like that's where most conversations beginning to lean.
Yeah, so Crypto Yield Info had this tweet or message in the DIGG Dojo chat about this would really blow up if we moved it to Arbitrum. And so yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, to step back, like I think the biggest, like trying to think about like what is the KPI that like DIGG, if we're hitting this, that DIGG is a success. And I kind of think that we're still in a place where with options, the KPI has been positive rebases, right? So just like the number going up, and keeping it above peg, which is just market cap, ties to the market cap. But like, I would like to see us looking for places that are integrations within DeFi that create a demand for DIGG outside of the like making money from the mechanism of DIGG, right? Like, I think that's like the core. We want it to be useful, right? Like we want it to have either like it's hedging volatility of Bitcoin in combination with other assets, or it's, there's a reason for being that's beyond just the mechanics of it, right? So, and I think that would also extend to just if it were on Arbitrum or, the DIGG in some other place is still just DIGG, right? It's still the same mechanism. So, I mean, it's like, if you asked me, like if we were to do another round of option, like I know UMA has a KPI options that pays out based on like how many integrations with UMA there are. So like I could see, and going back to Tridium's point about like the innovation, like I think that's kind of like the next space of innovation that we need to explore for DIGG is like, how do we get it, pooled with other assets or working in DeFi beyond the Badger ecosystem? Does anyone disagree with that or have ideas for how we could do that?
Yeah, I think it's tricky just because of the rebasing structure and the volatility. When you think about like how can you make an asset have utility in DeFi, the first thing you think is available as collateral in a bunch of different places. We still don't even have Badger on, Aave and Compound. I guess you could push to have like DIGG on Cream or DIGG on Cream. It's not there already. And then there's other, you can also think of when new products are launching, getting them, you're getting DIGG in there so you can get like high APY for single asset staking or LP staking or something, which is, just something you gotta know when things are launching. I think we could do something interesting with Ondo maybe for like an LP, more for like a single-sided LP thing. That could be fun. And I think that helps in the intermediate term, obviously, to get people to, get some utility out of it. I think if you want to talk about the crypto yield info message, I think what he's kind of getting at, just seeing on crypto Twitter, the sentiment was that people like Arbitrum. There's a lot of money on Arbitrum, but there aren't many places to put your money to make high yield on Arbitrum. And there's a whole run on Polygon and BSC of people launching like algo stablecoins with varied success depending on which time frame you look at. And they pop up and they have like 20,000 APY, yada yada yada. And I think I would agree with him that if something like that pops up, like a lot of assets will flow there, but that's not DIGG. DIGG going across chain is really just being available, maybe incentivizing a little liquidity, something like that. But it's not going to be, it's not going to like run it back with doing the distribution and have like super high yield. It's just not what it's gonna do. So yeah, I mean, it's similar for getting deployed a lot of places. It's gonna, it's a grind to, find the right places to have it be useful and push for it to be useful and things like that. And whether it's, DIGG or BDIGG makes it easier to integrate a lot of different places. But yeah, that's my kind of take. Like, there's no like, oh, we just move it over there and then it's successful. It's like, well, what practically does that mean? It means bridging the asset, having it be available, and then, what would drive people to hold it there versus here? I don't know if it makes a big difference. It'd actually probably make it even harder. I don't know, as far as the work that has been, Gasuda has been doing for the rebase options, tracking the activity on chain to incentivize. Now, do we need to, if it was on Arbitrum, we then possibly need to consider tracking those moves on Arbitrum, which I don't know how easily that can be done. So, anyways, that's my, not to be a wet blanket, but
and then I think we were talking about Badger and DIGG as well. And then obviously because they're both algorithmic coins, they had, a lot of interest peaked on DIGG. But that was probably 3-4 weeks ago. And I know Hashare might have actually talked to them more since then. I think he was leading a lot of discussions, but I don't think there's anything relevant to share right now, other than it was just some broad interest. It could be interesting to do something like, I don't know. I mean, like something similar to Ohm on Arbitrum for DIGG though. Like, it'd be a little bit of DIGG changing its colors, but all the focus right now is on Arbitrum. It would be an opportunity to kind of stay true to its purpose, but also evolve as like the whole DeFi space. I feel like honestly, it's the only place I feel like where I'm constantly feel behind and yet probably ahead of the curve relative to the general public. But I mean, with the constant, push to Arbitrum, the constant ways to kind of find new utility, like, maybe we could look at a way where we bond DIGG and then, evolve it into something on Arbitrum that would still be like super interesting and fun, and also provide more utility and allow us to move to Arbitrum in a way that makes sense. But again, not saying we should, just kind of thinking out loud right now.
And I mean, I'm not an expert on Ohm, and I've listened to several hours of podcasts on it at this point, but it's, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're a collateralized algo stable, and the idea is that, like, they're in this phase one of just like building up as much collateral as possible that they will then use to kind of defend pegs for whatever it ends up being pegged to, right? So like you could equate that to like the DIGG stability vault. They're just trying to, like, on the front end, load that as big as they can get in order to, like, then defend the peg. Is that the basic mechanism there?
It's not, I wouldn't compare it to stability vaults. It's actually a bit more complex than that. I would say it's like the way you can either stake or bond. And so they can raise capital or raise their assets that are supporting, or so everything. Ohm is backed by their treasury, right? So first off, if their treasury goes down in value, they burn Ohm. If it goes up, they print more of it. And the way that they raise more funds in their treasury is they basically provide these bonds, which provide a discount for Ohm. And so you can usually, I think there's like 3 or 4, like it's like Frax. There's a couple LPs, and you can buy Ohm on their site through the bonds at a discount if you want to kind of take a more active approach, and then that locks up whatever that value is, DAI, whatever it is, Frax, in their treasury, and then in turn allows them to print or create more Ohm, something along those lines. I wouldn't say it's stability vault. It's more probably akin to like a Federal Reserve strategy. But again, it's a rebasing token. It's not necessarily trying to stay pegged to a value as much as it is like trying to move away from, I think, fiat currencies in terms of its like pegged to assets, and look more at a mixed bag of treasury, or a mixed bag of crypto assets in their treasury that they use to peg Ohm to.
Yeah, I think the way it shakes out is that it's more, and maybe it was initially intended to just have dollars backing it, but to have the redemption value tracked to the treasury value, but probably retain some premium perpetually based on assumed future growth. And then I'm not sure what the exact burn mechanic is if the treasury kind of goes down in value, but they're bringing on more than just dollars now. I think they're like ETH and Bitcoin. So the analog for if you were to do this for DIGG is it could still be a rebasing type asset, but instead of being completely unbacked, it would be backed by accumulation of Bitcoin assets, IBTC or something like that, which would be cool. And then it would be kind of a DAO focused asset, and maybe it's a different asset, and that kind of consumes DIGG in some mechanical way around this. Just spitballing on what that structure would mean. It could carry on the flavor, and dot finance seems to be doing reasonably well so far, because it ends up with, instead of doing a straight algo unbacked, it's algo-ish, but has some backing. So it would just be a different kind of goal and intent. But in the end, you're coming out with something that's has assets backing it, which makes it a bit more stable, probably. So, anyways, I think you'd be interested to hear what people think about that as a potential opportunity for kind of as a evolution or migration.
So, can you hear me now? I was having.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I picked up all of that last bit of conversation, but I think you guys were talking about moving DIGG either to another chain, or to bridging it to another chain, or to moving to some sort of like partially backed or backed asset, right? That has something behind it. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, like in my opinion, like the way that DIGG has to go, there are a couple of different options. One is we can kind of keep doing what it's doing right now, but probably would need some sort of its own governance and team to be focused on it. And if you want to think long term, they would need to be supporting it in some way. And then you need to have a long term plan for how you're getting these assets to continue doing these, the options, or however you want to structure it long term. So there needs to be either another token or a minting event or a rebase tax or something like that long term. But then there's got to be kind of a crew committing to it. So that's one, but it's kind of stays as is. The other thing is this other model. Just bridging to Arbitrum by itself, it doesn't do anything.
Well, so here, let me throw out what so here's my thoughts. Like, I think that the point of the thing that you could do with moving DIGG to another chain would be not to bridge it, but to like do a DIGG v2 and cannibalize the old one, right? So you could launch a new DIGG, for example, on Arbitrum, and then you could have some sort of smart contract where you burned your DIGG on ETH, and then when it was burnt, you would automatically get sent these new tokens on Arbitrum, right? So the opportunity, I think, to me, the big opportunity to move to another chain would be to like rethink what the mechanics are of DIGG and then deploy that somewhere where it's like cheaper and easier to trade, which is kind of what people want to do with it. And then the question is like, what are those mechanics? And I think it's interesting to think about partially backed things. The challenge is that like current DIGG owners like want value, right? They need whatever this new thing is. And if this thing is going to be partially asset backed, then like where do those assets come from, right? And how, if you're going to think about like a DIGG 2, then what is DIGG 2 and how do you transition like the value of the current holders of DIGG into that? And I actually think that's a really interesting question. And I think like some people go and take a bunch of time on it, and there's a lot of cool things that we could come up with, but I don't think any of it's real simple.
No, and so that's kind of what I was getting at. I think there's the two other options I see is one is you go with like a partial backed stable algo coin, and you try to go that route, and either you come up with something completely new, which that's a lot of work to come up with something like that to be new, and what the transition would be. And maybe look at something like Frax that has had some Frax or Fey. I forget which one of them has had reasonable success. I think Frax has been pretty stable, but it's partially backed. You can look at like what they do, maybe, and maybe partner with them to kind of make it work. I don't know exactly how all the mechanics function. And then the other option is like this, Olympus type option where you fork Olympus, but it's Bitcoin focused. And it consumes Bitcoin. You could use the bonds, make a pretty good mechanic for consuming DIGG, where you could do something like instead of taking in the new token paired with Bitcoin, you would take in DIGG paired with Bitcoin, and then swap out the DIGG, burn it, mint the new token pair, and then that's the LP that you're accumulating, just like how Olympus does it with Ohm ETH or Ohm DAI right now. So I think that when you're in the situation where you're doing a large minting event, you're starting with very low supply, and then you're just doing a lot of minting out of the gate, like Olympus does. It gives you a lot of leeway to be able to consume something and do that transition.
So I have two things. One is just that these are a lot of what ifs that are going back to that like original point of DIGG needing some sort of like governance structure, and that that necessarily doesn't have to be its own token, but some clarity within inside of like Badger DAO is like what DIGG support is going to be. And if it's just a matter of like we need to go write a bunch of bounties or whatever, and then Badger's gonna support that with Badger tokens, that would probably be like the simplest thing I can think of. And then the other thing is like I just wanted to pose my my what if solution to DIGG, since we're talking about all these different ways of like recollateralizing it and moving it to other chains and stuff. One of the things that I talked about doing was basically whitelisting LPs for the rebasing, so that the rebasing would only act on like a whitelisted LPs instead of looking at like DIGG everywhere. And then also the rebasing would only happen on people within the LP as well. And like what that would do essentially is you're borrowing DIGG from the people that are providing liquidity. And then as you borrow that DIGG, the algorithm will replace that DIGG, right? Or if you return that DIGG, the algorithm will slowly delete the DIGG. But then what it does is then, since you don't have to worry about the rebasing, right, you can just take DIGG off chain, and so you immediately have DIGG on whatever chains you want. And then you provide liquidity on whatever chains you want to support, and you whitelist those liquidity pools for rebasing if you want to, right? You could also just leave the rebasing completely on Ethereum, and then that way everybody can go trade DIGG on side chains for cheap like they want.
I mean,
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
is there any reason for DIGG to be on Ethereum?
I mean, the Badger sets are on Ethereum, and DIGG is a part of the boost, right? I mean, I don't know what the technical aspects of it, but yeah.
I mean, we can do sets with Boost and Badger Tree on Polygon and Arbitrum as well now. So like,
if you need, so if we're going to keep moving forward with the whole economic market incentives to stabilize DIGG, I think it needs to stay where the most money is, so that there's larger forces to push it one way or the other.
One other point of changing like DIGG to act only on the LPs, like I was proposing, is you do create the utility then for it that everyone is asking for, because it allows, like, you know, a whale or whatever to go and deposit a bunch of Bitcoin into the Badger sets, and then take like the equivalent amount of Bitcoin and, you know, short it, and then buy DIGG with that, and then get the Badger boost and Bitcoin, and have like a more market neutral position.
Right. The other thing, I mean, like, just looking at my own behavior on Ethereum, like, basically Ethereum for me is now like a special occasion time. Like, I've got to wake up early and like wait for gas to be low. And like, the whole point of DIGG is that like people are actively trading it and looking at the peg each day, and like try, you know, if we expect the mechanism to work as it exists right now, it's a whole lot of people looking at it and actively trading. And I mean, Wiesik, you have the spreadsheet of like the average size of DIGG, but if you just look at like the average holder of DIGG, their position size versus like what it realistically costs to make these trades on Ethereum, like, I think it could be like one universe we could be living is like DIGG works perfectly well, but like the average holder can't afford to make trades to support it. Like, that's, I think, probably the strongest reason to move off Ethereum.
Yeah, just going back to my point though, like, do we have ideas of how to, like, do we want to move forward with some discussion of how DIGG gets support in governments? I mean, is it something as simple as like we write bounties, or do we want to, like, you know, try and go even further with it? I just don't see any of this happening without there being some more support, right? Like Wiesik can't just do everything.
Yeah, I guess that's okay. I guess, how does the DIGG community want to be heard? I mean, lighting up a new snapshot contract for just people that hold DIGG LP, whatever, would not be difficult. And it, you know, just be for signaling or whatever. But if that's what the community wants to do, and not leave it up to like Badger voters, because I think we're kind of at this kind of not impasse, but, you know, fork in the road of like, which way are we going to go? And, you know, it's really up to the community for like which direction. And I think, you know, the core team will be supportive in whatever direction like the community really wants to go. But I don't think there's like a slam dunk right now for like, oh, this is the way we have to go. I think it just depends on, you know, what people want, what they want out of the asset, what the community feels will be valuable, and like what they want to actually, you know, support, be involved with.
I think there's this, if I'm looking at it kind of from both sides right now, I think there's this challenge where, like, just calling kind of a spade, like DIGG and Badger are like two DAOs that exist in one, right? Like, and DIGG is like a really cool experimental product, but at the same time, it's like, it's not perfectly aligned with, I think, the broader Badger vision right now, right? But it's still like, it's part of this whole idea of like Bitcoin focused products and everything. On the same side, like the whole idea of the DAO is like, it's very much like community driven, like everybody has a vote, everybody has a say. But at the same time, like everybody's also looking for like a top down vision. Like, well, what do people think is the right thing to do? Like, does the team think we should do this or this? I think we've talked about a ton of ideas, like whether it's like Arbitrum or different like rebasing strategies, or whether it's moving to L2, or whether it's just staying on Ethereum and going with like a ample like governance token or something. Like, the idea, I think, is that the main takeaway is that there's an idea that something needs to be done. So I think the thing that probably would be helpful is like having some sort of coming together of like, core team and community to kind of like put together a vision that says like, hey, this is where we should go. Cause I think that's the challenge, is it's hard to come up like bottoms up all the time and kind of say like, well, we're going to go this way, but then it's, I don't know, I think that's the challenge I kind of am always in. And I think the team's very supportive. So I'm not trying to sound like it's not supportive. It's just, there's what should we do? Like what does make the most sense,
Well,
I mean, to me, it comes down to like, so the team is, I think the team is very supportive. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
you're good.
Yeah. Okay, good. I think the team is very supportive of the community doing whatever they want with DIGG. I think like, like we think that what DIGG needs is a lot more work and like some good new ideas, right? You're right though, that like the team doesn't, what is challenging is to like actually think about that and do that work and do that implementation. So to me, like DIGG kind of needs to, like somehow, and Wes, you've kind of been doing this, but like it needs to find its own leadership. And I think it kind of needs to find its own like developer, right? It needs to find somebody that like technically can say like, yeah, okay, let's do this and start experimenting with stuff. And like when there's ideas can just say like, yeah, I can do that, and like feed in that technical feedback. Right. And I think that's the thing that will allow DIGG to kind of actually be something other than this thing that's kind of also being supported by the team.
Yeah, what if we and I think there's got to be some kind of combo and decision making. I agree on that, but maybe they're put together like a DIGG council or something like that, and then we could just have some. I think I agree that especially being badgered out for on the core team for this long, like you want the community feedback, but going to the community and be like, hey, what do you guys think? It's tough. It's got to be guided. It's got to be good directed, and then very targeted, so they can get good feedback from a lot of people quickly and not like exhaust them where they're like, why are you still asking me about this like 3 weeks later? But maybe we could get like a small group and do a couple sessions of spitballing and coming up with 1 or 2 or 3 options that we kind of can flesh out a little more, that the council and the core team are both think are like pretty decent, and then can kind of bring those forward to the community for some sort of vote, whether it's using Badger or just like Discord or spinning up a new snapshot contract quickly. What do you guys think about that? We could just make sure, let's say like 5 community members or something like that seem to be the most active or interested in DIGG, and then we can kind of have that smaller spitball.
Well, but my question is still, so when then there's governance, right? How, it's the execution that's the challenge, right? So where's the execution coming from? Because it's, the team doesn't need to be involved in governance if the team, or doesn't need to be as involved in governance if the team doesn't need to be as involved in the implementation of the governance, right? But if the team is going to be responsible for the implementation, then we also have to think about the governance to make sure that like what is being governed is something that can actually be implemented.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's us being kind of involved in the discussion early on, and maybe we're just involved in the governance and like helping light up the new snapshot contract. But I think if it's going to go a direction where there's going to be a lot of development work, the assumption should be that a lot of these options result in like a new asset being launched, or inflation, or like funds being available. And then I think the idea is, I agree with you that there needs to be a technical person that's more focused on DIGG for one of these are not super simple things to just go ahead and roll out. But I think discussing the models first makes sense, and then when we get an idea of which one we want to do, like then it's going to have to be finding the right resources to do it that aren't the core team.
Yeah, and I agree. My concern is like like when we do snapshots and then they pass, then people expect that we implement them, right? And like there's oftentimes a lot of community discontent around snapshots that pass and then nothing happens, right? So I think, I guess it makes sense to figure out what you want to do and then figure out how to do it and then maybe do a snapshot. But I think, and I guess maybe if you want to use like snapshots to somehow like help like figure out what people want, that makes sense. But maybe that makes more sense to just do like an emoji votes on the Discord, right? But in the end, like, you know, like there needs to be a plan, and then that BIP, that snapshot that finally goes through, like the resources need to be figured out and available and allocated, and like all of that really needs to be thought out before it goes to governance.
I mean, you know, one thing you could do is just like structure it like a SPAC essentially, right? Is you just say, okay, we're gonna have a snapshot where people vote in these 5 people, and then they have, you know, this amount of dig, and then they're gonna go out and they're gonna advance dig, and when they make a decision, like we'll all vote on it or whatever with a Badger snapshot, but we're just gonna put the funds in their hands, and then they're gonna go hire people or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I like what you're saying, John, too, because let me rephrase the problem. I think the problem right now is that there's lots of ideas. There's a lot of things that when you think about it really have to be done. Like even when you think about just the BIP that was put together recently for the TCL and stuff, like there was a lot of things that were uncovered during that. Like, okay, we might not have the right percent total supply. There might be obligations we have or liabilities that we need to consider. There's other things that we need to consider. And I see this as almost being like maybe it's not a permanent council, but like a 3-month discovery council who's like sole purpose. Maybe it's more than 5 people. I mean, it's like 6 or 7 people, and there's a balance across community and a couple people that would need to be involved. And their sole purpose is to like make sure we have like, okay, like we've cleaned up the balance sheet. Like that's pretty much done, but that's just an example. We've like thought about all the needs. We've considered all the options from the community. We're going to summarize them here with like 2 or 3 top ones. We're going to provide more details, more information, what it might take, what a burn down model would look like in terms of like runway. And we're going to come back to the group and say like, hey, we think these are probably the 3 most viable options. And then that at least is a more impactful or like actionable thing versus kind of always trying to figure out, like there's always something that needs to be done, but it's hard to motivate or get action completed when there's no kind of like group that's kind of collectively trying to do it together.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, you know, the first thing is, okay, get the action focused group together and be like, all right, there's been a lot of discussions over the past couple months, I think, about like, okay, what are the next steps? But you just have some people need to be empowered to be like, all right, we're going to either just scope out, you know, hash out all the different options that people want to propose, settle on, you know, 2 that seem reasonable, and then do a vote. And in that vote, it would have to be for the 2 options. Like one might be, okay, this is not as much work and can be done through some bounties and through, you know, finding the right people to participate. And the other one might be, okay, this is like launching a new thing and it's going to take a lot more effort, and it's going to be dependent on finding the right, you know, technical resource to commit to it for some period of time, at least, to get it up and live. And, you know, you can put those qualifiers on the post. And then, you know, I still think it's important to have community buy-in. And I think just what we've learned over the past, you know, however many months, 9 months, 10 months with Badger, it's like, you know, the discussion channels in Discord are great. And then the, you know, snapshots seem to work fairly well, but, you know, having that balance, it needs to be directed. It needs to be very clear for a lot of data around stuff, which takes a good bit of work. And then say, hey, this is what we're looking to do. Light discussion in the channels, hash out people's questions so they can understand it, because it's probably going to be a fairly complex topic, and then slide into snapshot to get that kind of buy-in. And then that gives us a clear, like, okay, cool, now we can actually go do something.
I agree. I apologize, guys, I have to jump for another call I have right at this time. But I think, again, happy to talk about about options in DIGG Dojo or the discussion thread if we have any questions. And I think putting together some sort of group of individuals that can start taking these conversations to the next level is probably the next right thing to do. So we can explore what figure out how to get to that point.
Wiesik, real quick before you hop off, someone in the chat was asking about, so this round, are we definitely going to 3 months with this current round? Like, can we come
Yeah,
to
we have to do something more than 30 days. Like just
Yeah.
practically speaking, like the previous rewards are in a contract that can't be claimed until the team goes in there and uses the short token to basically claim. And then also we wait until the 60 days are up and we claim any unclaimed tokens and our options to pull them over. So like just practically speaking, like there's no way it can be any less than 2 months in my opinion, but that would still put a huge immediate like push on the team. My support would be just going to quarterly cycles right now. I think that's, you know, the impact, the way things work, the mechanics would still be the same. It would just be spread over 3 months versus one, and it would give people the chance to actually hold options. But anyways, I could talk more about this. I do have to jump though. Sorry. I'll hope that answers your question though.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
See you guys.
All right. Yeah. I mean, the council, personally, I strongly support it. I think there's a need to, like, one of the missing links was kind of this, having the core team in these conversations and knowing like, oh, this is, you know, we could do this, but that's going to be a super heavy lift compared to this other thing. Like, I don't think we were having that level of feedback as we were talking about various stuff with changes to the options. So I think, yeah, like we need to have, whatever we do, we need to move forward with a much greater awareness of like the trade-offs and logistics and time and developer resources that are required for any of these changes. So yeah, we're at time here. So unless anyone has any questions or other comments, I say let's continue this conversation on the council so we can refine a couple proposals on the next steps and move on to the next chapter.
Sounds good.
All
Thanks
right.
for hosting. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining.
Everyone for coming. I see Tom's OX in here. I think he has a POAP for this call, so he's your man for this. And thanks everyone for joining us today.